Good morning and welcome to the GreenRoc Mining PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll, and I'd now like to hand you over to Stefan Bernstein, CEO. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Alessandro, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this presentation today, where I'm going to fill you in on the recent developments at the Amitsoq graphite deposit in South Greenland. It's been a little while since we last met, so to speak. I think I presented in September last year. I had a presentation, also like a year-end presentation in December. There really has been quite a bit of movement on our project in South Greenland since then. So I'll get on to that in a minute. For those of you who are new, there will be some repetition, of course, of some of the stuff that I presented in September, but there will. I'll do that fairly short, so to get on to the new stuff quickly. But here is a picture of Amitsoq. It's situated on the southern tip of a long island in southern Greenland. It's in fact at the southern tip of Greenland and the southern tip of this island, and it's conveniently located adjacent to deep water that remains ice-free year-round, which is an enormous advantage to the project. Right, so let me get on here. Couple of, let's see. Okay, yeah. So get through the disclaimers. So this is an overview of the presentation. I'll first go through some of the details about the Amitsoq graphite project. I'll also then touch on some meetings I've had in Greenland over the past couple of months. Some development on the potential support from the European Union, and also dwell a bit on agreement with LNS, a Norwegian mining and construction company, and discuss a little bit about the way forward, of course, both in the short perspective and a longer perspective. So as you can see here, the business objective really is to produce graphite for the EV batteries. Graphite is sourced many places in the world presently, but mostly in Africa and China. I'll get back to that in a moment. What you can see from this slide is that GreenRoc Mining has 3 projects. The Amitsoq in South Greenland, that is the focus of this presentation. We have 2 more projects, the Thule Black Sands, which is a titanium alluvial sand project in northern Greenland, and the Melville Bay iron ore. We are currently focusing all our efforts on Amitsoq. It doesn't mean that we're not doing anything on the 2 other projects, but of course they will be moving forward somewhat more slowly. But I will fill you in also on the development of those in a meeting to come later this spring. Okay, so importantly here is to realize how substantial graphite really is to the energy transition. Very soon there will be millions and millions of electric cars on our streets. Every one of them will be powered by a lithium-ion battery, and graphite is really the one component that makes up the largest proportion of these batteries. More than 1/5 of the battery by weight is made up of graphite, which means that an average electric vehicle on the streets today are carrying between, well, typically 60-70 kilograms of graphite, and it's graphite in the form of spherical graphite, high purity spherical graphite. Well, graphite by nature forms graphite flakes, as you can see on the lower left hand panel. They have to be processed into spherical graphite, which are these minute particles, rounded and then purified, so to achieve better than 99.95% purity. That's a process that presently only is taking place in China, and of course that has some very substantial or important implications for supply chain security. And in fact, so battery factories, the so-called gigafactories in Europe and United States, North America today, are importing all of their high purity spherical graphite for the battery anodes from China. So we'll see an enormous increase in demand for graphite, similar to what we've seen for lithium over the past couple of years. In fact, several analysts have suggested that graphite is going to be the next lithium, and the reason for that is that China has its own production of EV batteries, which is going up 5 times over the next 7 years. So, and considering that just to supply the European EV battery factories will be looking at a annual capacity of about 1 terawatt hours in 2030, which is only 7 years away. That in turn requires in the order of 1 to 2 million tons of graphite, compared to last year's demand that was only 170,000 tons. So Benchmark Intelligence has provided a forecast for graphite supply. The black curve here shows the supply that's going to go in deficit from this year, remain in mild deficit over the next 3 years, when it's going to fall completely off the graph here. And there's a deficit of up to about 1 million tons per year by 2030. This is why Benchmark Mineral Intelligence has estimated that in order to supply all of the raw materials for the energy transition, we need by 2035, a bit more than 10 years away, we are in need of all these new mines, which translates into about nearly 100 new average size graphite mines, nearly 100 new mines. So that's, you know, a very serious challenge, of course, to the energy transition. And it's something that concerns, of course, also the industry, which and presently they are starting to be made deals with regard to securing the supply of certain of these critical raw materials, such as foremost lithium. Right. So the question is, where's all the needed graphite going to come from? And one is not the question, but certainly part of the answer to that is Amitok. It's a deposit that just keeps getting better and better the more we know about it. It's located here in the southern tip of this long island, 20-kilometer long island, in the middle of the fjord, 20 kilometers north of Nanortalik town. It was a mine 100 years ago. This is a photograph from one of the old mine adits. It closed in 1922, but is in excellent condition today. I'll get on to discuss the resource that we have here. We've conducted some work showing that the graphite really is of very high quality. That work was conducted in 2018, 1920, based on surface sampling and also some samples from inside the old mine. And then GreenRoc decided to do the first exploration drilling altogether on this deposit in 2021. And we've had 2 very successful drilling seasons. So we're now really moving from exploration stage into development. I will also just mention here, I'll get onto that in a minute here, that we have other deposits nearby. These shows the entire license ground that we are holding in South Greenland that encompasses several high-grade graphite deposits. So what it is we have here at Amitok is a deposit with a remarkably high grade. After 2 drilling seasons here, we now have a resource upgrade that we announced in January this year, with a total resource of more than 20 million tons at 20.4% graphite, which translates into 4.7 million tons of graphite. That means that we moved last year's resource that already was really good at about 8 million tons, but was mostly in the inferred category. We now moved all of that, basically more than 7 million tons at 21% graphite, into the measured and indicated category, which is a category with a much higher degree of certainty. If you take the resource that we have in ground here and look at our value as expressed by our market cap, we have a value of well, it's a few dollars per ton of graphite resource. Compare that to all the other projects here with the green bars. It shows that we are heavily undervalued, which also, of course, means that we have a tremendous potential for value increase here. In fact, LNB Capital released an update to their research note in February. It can be found on our website, that has our shares valued at 37p. With the orange bars here, I've also plotted the average grade of the ore, showing that we are really within the very top of graphite deposits worldwide. And mind you, I'm only showing you here deposits with more than 5% graphite on average. In fact, today, the average grade of ore in graphite mines under operation is about 6-7%. There's a lot of projects now under development, all over the world, but they usually, or many of them, have 3, 4, 5% graphite, even down to 2% graphite. Okay. So the ore bodies, that's another advantage with this project, is that the Amitok ore bodies are really well defined. They have a simple geometry. They basically are expressed as 2 main ore bodies, the lower graphite layer and the upper graphite layer, shown here in red and yellow, respectively. This is the Amitok Island looking from the west towards the east. The southern tip is here. And so the layers are dipping towards us. And in fact, we haven't reached the outer boundaries of the ore bodies. So the deposit really is still open towards the north, down dip towards the west, and towards the south. So the estimate I just showed you in the former slide is a very conservative minimum. Also, the graphite layers here, particularly the low graphite layer, have an extraordinary consistency of grades. It is about 20%, between 20 and 24% graphite all through. So you drill these white, pale granitic gneisses, which is the wall rock, And then when you get into the ore body, everything turns black immediately. The drill mud comes up and it's all black. The core is black. It goes directly from 0 to 20-something% graphite, and then you're out again after, the thickness of the ore body is drilled. So that means that the estimation of ore here, the ore volume and tonnages is quite robust, and also it bodes very well for the processing. Nearby, we have, as I mentioned, other deposits. Here's a Galak deposit. It's located about 5 kilometers away to the south. There's been done some work here, channel sampling, some mapping, some geophysics. It shows that it's quite an extensive field of ore bodies. They also are quite high in graphite, although there's some indication that surface sampling sometimes give higher values than drill core. So maybe they are slightly lower than these, but there are indications here between 20 and 30% graphite. So certainly something that rivals the ore grades that we have at Amitog. This is certainly a place also that could be developed. We are presently, again, we are focusing on Amitog because we feel that's the one that we can get onto production the fastest. But it's important to bear in mind that we have these deposits and occurrences nearby. Structures here is a bit more complicated than Amitog, so it probably requires a bit more drilling in order to achieve a good resource. And we have several other deposits. Last year's field campaign showed that we have a high-grade deposit here down in the North Lake Island. There's another high-grade between 20 and 25% graphite up here, Amitog Valley. So really we are developing a graphite district here. And it's all under GREENROC mining licenses. So another important development has been on the processing of the Amitog graphite ore. We showed already last fall that we can, by simple flotation, achieve a quite high percentage of graphite concentrate, namely 96% graphite. Now we have taken that graphite concentrate and have ProGraphite in Germany conducting some test work on micronizing and spheronizing it. And this is an actual photomicrograph of graphite from Amitog that's been spheronized into these spheres that are used as an active anode material for EV batteries. Very, very successful spheronization. It looks like the material that we have at Amitog is perfectly suited for this processing technique. And also we were able to achieve a very high purity, 99.97% graphite, both with IHF, which is like the standard purification method, but also using the milder and less expensive alkaline fusion, which is using sodium hydroxide. So all that looks very good. We are also looking at some numbers in terms of production. I think a conservative estimate here would be to produce at least 400,000 tons of ore per year, which would, after processing, yield about 60 to 80,000 tons of graphite concentrate that we can then go on and process to spherical graphite for the gigafactories. I'll get onto that in a moment. Also wanted to again mention here that there's a potential for supplying at least some of the energy with a CO2 neutral energy sources from the Desjosasuk hydropower plant, which has been planned by the by the Greenland government. It's not set up yet, but it's on the planning stage. There's also very good potential for wind turbines to supply some of the energy also. So we are presently looking at several solutions along with the the Greenland government. Another important aspect here is the shipping time to the big market in Europe, and of course also our peers within the graphite industry or graphite resource industry. So today, as I mentioned, North America and Europe, the gigafactories there, they get all of their spherical graphite from China. And since China has been a net importer of graphite over the past 4 years, there's in fact so that probably some of that graphite is actually being shipped first from Africa, then to China, which is about 35 days of shipping, processed there, and then 40 days of shipping to Europe. That's something where we have a really competitive advantage, being situated only 5 days of shipping away from Northern Europe, and about 7 days of shipping away from the northeastern US seaboard. There are a handful of graphite projects underway in Europe. There's the Skarland, which is a producing mine in northern Norway. They don't produce battery grade graphite. It's all coarse grain graphite that is used, or coarse flake graphite that is being used for the more traditional applications, basically mostly in the steel industry. Then there's a Vittangi Talgas project, big project up in northern Sweden. They don't really have a mining permit yet, but they have that is the project with the highest graphite grade. That's potentially coming on stream in some years to come. As I said, they don't have a mining permit. Their graphite is also of a composition that requires a little bit different processing. So they're developing that now. Then we have Voxna and Autolampi in Finland, Voxna in Sweden. They are still quite early stage. I would say that, well, the point of this slide really is that even if they all come into production by 2030, they'll still only be supplying maximum of 30% of the graphite needs by the European gigafactories. Right. This slide is just showing you basically the same situation applies to North America. We are conveniently located midway between two of the biggest markets in the world for the gigafactories, to supply gigafactories. So certainly there's a potential here also to supply the US market. And in fact, with the resources we have in Greenland, well, and given the demand for both markets, there's a good chance that we could actually ramp up production and provide graphite to both markets. In fact, we have so much graphite in ground that it's mainly a question of raising sufficient capital to develop it. Right. So then a bit about the meetings I've had in Greenland. So I went to Greenland in January to meet both with the government in Nuuk, and also that was actually the main purpose of the travel, was to go to Nanortalik and hold an information meeting with the local community there. So Nanortalik town is a town of about 1,100 people. As I said, it's located about 20 kilometers away from Amitsoq. And it's likely to be the main hub for transportation, and also obviously some people in the town will provide labor to the project. They have a quite modern harbor. It's not a big harbor, but it's well equipped. And this photo here testifies to the ice-free conditions that I just mentioned. This is the Amitsoq Fjord, taken in January 23. Right. It's an old town by Greenland standards. It was the church there was built the same year as the mine, the nearby Amitsoq mine, came into production in 1914. So we held a series of information meetings that was quite well attended. We also met with the local hunters union and the workers union. We were really met with a lot of interests, and the main the main worry really from the local people's side was whether this really is becoming reality, and when will it start? When will we start construction and so forth? And they really see it as a way to, of course, generate income, a workplace, and they kind of like the idea of being a mining town again. Something I'll touch on in a second. I'll just show you that. Okay, so we aren't really drilling or doing any field work right now, but that doesn't mean that we're not moving forward with the project, because samples collected last summer and fall of various biological matter and so on is now providing the basis for the environmental impact assessment, which is ongoing, of course. We also just started the social impact assessment that is going to sketch out the project and how it's going to affect the local population and Greenland as such. As I said, Greenland, really, South Greenland has a long mining history, and they're quite proud of it. Here we have examples. There's a Josva copper mine a bit further to the west. There's the Ividut mine that was running for more than 100 years, a quite profitable mining operation. And then we have the nearby Nalunaq mine. There's a gold mine that was active in about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and is presently during reopening. And it's just it's actually our closest neighbor. Here is Amitok graphite mine, and this is the gold mine. And then, of course, we have the Amitok mine operating for 6-8 years. Okay. I also went to Nuuk. I had a very good meeting with the Minister of Mineral Resources and Justice, Aqalu Ede. He was very supportive of our project also. He is from South Greenland. Greenland really has the same, you can say, challenges as many other countries today, where people move from the villages out in the countryside towards the bigger cities, and therefore they are worried about deep population. So again, very supportive, and in fact they see the mineral extractive industry to be an important diversification of the Greenland economy. And I'm also proud to tell you that we received the Prospectors and Developer of the Year Award 2023 by the Greenland government. It's presented to a company who has been active in advancing exploration projects, has shown initiative, innovation, and are operating according to the best environmental and social responsibility practices. So I see that as another sign of recognition from the Greenland government. Okay. So, as you may have seen from the RNS last month, we received a letter of support from the European Raw Materials Alliance. It came after a quite long process, about half a year, where we presented. There's a two-stage process. We prepared some material that was then evaluated by the European Raw Materials Alliance board and 3 experts. I was giving a presentation in December, and then they were looking at the project, and then made a decision in January, and it was a very positive decision that they gave us a full support. Now, what this means is that I'm hopeful that this would open some doors to both financial investors or financial support, financial institutions that we have not yet met, because there are a lot of different funding possibilities throughout Europe. And also we're hopeful that it will open doors towards potential off-takers, battery car manufacturers, and so forth. I can mention that we are, of course, talking to them already. And in fact, I wouldn't say that's the most work I do, but it certainly takes up a considerable amount of my time to make connections to the potential off-takers. So it's battery industry, it's a car industries, it's a graphite industries, because both because it provides funding, it potentially provides funding for the onwards development. It also potentially could supply us with some technical expertises that could help us out in our path towards production. A very important piece of document was released yesterday. It's the Critical Raw Materials Act, announced by the EU Commission yesterday. It sets out some strategic raw materials that require specific attention here over the coming time, and natural graphite is one of these strategic raw materials. Actually, one other one is a titanium metal, so that bodes well for our ilmenite project up in North Greenland, of course. But natural flake graphite is what we have it at Amitsoq, and it says here that that the regulation sets clear benchmarks for domestic capacities along the strategic raw material supply chain, and it's in fact it's so that it's set to that there should be a 10% domestic supply of EU's annual consumption for these strategic raw materials. And it also says here that for the processing side, it's even more ambitious, namely 40% has to be domestic. And then it opens to other different supplies also outside of EU, although I think that Greenland certainly qualifies as being a EU, not a member, but associated country. Another important piece of statement here is that, in addition, selected strategic projects will benefit from support for access to finance and shorter permitting timeframes. And I think this is what we're aiming at now. We just passed this test from the European Raw Materials Alliance for support. So I will have a meeting next week with the European Raw Materials Alliance. Hopefully, then we can be acknowledged as a strategic project without too much delay. Okay, so we also signed a non-binding MOU with LNS last month, or earlier this month actually. But it's been a negotiation that's taken place over some time. LNS is a very important player in the Nordic countries. It's a specialist company in terms of underground operations, but they're also a strong construction company, and they are running some mines. They have been running the Rana iron mine in Norway. It's actually been the lowest operating costs worldwide for an iron ore mine. They are running the Abiladok ruby mine in Greenland. They have constructed tunnels in Hong Kong. They are building harbors and so on. Now, what this will this MOU really lies a foundation for further talks. There's a series of potential avenues that we can follow here. One is that they could potentially take direct equity for providing some funding for some of the work we'll be doing. Another option is, because of their expertises, is that they could undertake certain work of the work program in return for equity or royalty or similar. And eventually, of course, one of their main interests is to become the operating partner when it comes to construction and operating the mine at Amitog. I also just mentioned that in addition to producing graphite at the mine site in Greenland, producing graphite concentrate, we are also now considering developing a proper domestic production of spherical graphite. So taking the flakes from the concentrate, micronize and classify in terms of size ranges, and then spheronization to the end product. That's something that, as I said, presently only takes place in China. It's mostly a mechanical process, apart from the cleaning stage, to reach the 99.95% purity. And today we could call up a Chinese company, Henson or some other company, and have them probably doing an MOU or even an offtake agreement. But I think that's kind of missing the point here in terms of securing the supply chain. So we've been talking to a European producer of a new equipment that is aimed at spheronized graphite. It's a German company. And we will be running so we took out a 700 kilogram bulk sample last year. It's presently under processing in Germany. And once we have the graphite concentrate from there, we'll do some test work with this new equipment in Germany and see whether that's a viable solution to provide us with possibilities for setting up production of spherical graphite in Europe. And of course, with this new Critical Raw Materials Act, there's certainly opening doors also to funding of such projects. Right, getting on to the roadmap here to production. I'm running a bit short of time here, so very quickly, we are still intending to have production starting in 2027. So presently, we're doing the environmental and social impact assessments. We are also right now looking at proposals for a scoping study that will be conducting. It takes about 6 months, so they'll be ready by early fall, and that should lead us into exploitation permit next year and so forth. Construction 25, 26, and start production in 27. Parallel to this, we are, as I said, developing a potential production of high purity spherical graphite, because there's a very important value increase from the graphite concentrate to the spherical graphite. And of course, we would like to have a part of that upside. And so we are, of course, also doing our best to market our project. That is something that is important to of course arrive at potential offtake agreements. It's also important for us to be more recognized with investors, to drive our share price up. And so I'll be presenting at the Benchmark Mineral Intelligence Gigafactory conference in Budapest in a couple of weeks' time, 10 days' time. Also at the Raw Materials Summit in Brussels later in May. And so I think I'll stop here and go over to some questions that you have. So thank you,
Stefan. That's great. Thank you very much for your presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Stefan takes a few moments to review those questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Stefan, as you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation. And if I could just ask you to read out the questions and give responses where it's appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
Okay, so there's a couple of pre-submitted questions here. The first one is, what was the justification for the placement at 3.7p so soon after a 4.5p round was completed? As a subscriber to the 4.5p round, I feel aggrieved, and I'm sure others are too. Yes, and that includes me, actually. I was allowed to invest in December, so I invested some of my savings here at 4.5p. That's a really good question. So it is so that the drill program last year was quite successful, and therefore we decided while we were drilling to conduct a bit more work, namely that we took out this bog sample that is presently in Germany. So the 700 kilogram bog sample from the underground workings was taken out, and then there was increased because of these very impressive intersections of graphite ore. There was also some other increased costs. So when we got into the late fall, early winter, we could see that we needed to do a raise in order to undertake some of this extra work also, and of course pay for that, whatever extra that operation cost. But that was at a time where we didn't really have the full results. We didn't have a resource upgrade yet. So we decided just to do a smaller raise, also because the share price wasn't great at that time. So we raised a couple of 100,000 in December. Now, we had anticipated that the share price would go up quite significantly because we were releasing this very good grades that we received the grades just before Christmas, and then a resource update in mid-January. Well, the share price didn't really move that much. And then with the added, I mean, the market is just really horrible. So when we did the next raise that we had to do in order to carry on with the work program, well, regrettably, it was now down at 3.5. It just wasn't possible to do a raise at a higher price. So, but I'm really hopeful that this is the last time we need to do raises at that kind of price. And there's a lot of things that I think is showing that we are on the right track towards creating more anticipation and thereby a better share price for us. And I'll ask you to take a look at the value that Allenby Capital has announced for us of 37p, which is a much more fair valuation of us. Right. And then there's another one here. Good morning, Mr. Bernstein. GreenRoc intends to fast-track Amazon. You recently stated that GreenRoc believe they can accelerate the project, and that when demand for graphite rises, you'll be ready to supply the growing market. Your roadmap shows a production start in H1 2027. So have GreenRoc now brought forward this expected start date? And if so, do you anticipate the new date to be? What do you anticipate the new date to be? Yes, we're still planning for production in 27, and we're still on track with that. As you may have noted from my presentation here, Benchmark Mineral Intelligence anticipate a very significant supply deficit that kicks in 27. So that's a perfect match. I think 2027 is perfectly feasible to be in production. Bringing that start date forward would be a lot more challenging because there are simply certain things that we need to undertake. I just mentioned the social and environmental impact assessments. There's also a pre-feasibility and a DFS, a definitive feasibility study that has to be carried out. it could perhaps be accelerated further, but that would require, that we could a completely different access to capital, and I'm not sure that it could be moved very substantially. Let me see here. Would GREENROC consider joint ventures in order to fulfill mining opportunities? And thereby you probably mean at Amitok, and for sure. And I mean, we have been talking to some of them, quite a few actually, of the major mining companies, using some of the older contacts we've had, but also creating some new ones at the Prospectors and Developers Convention in Toronto last week. None of the major miners are into graphite. We talked to some of the smaller mining companies that could perhaps be interested. One of them is, for instance, LNS. It's not like it's not mostly known for its mining capabilities, but operations. But that could, of course, be a way of moving our project forward. So we're definitely, yes, sorry, that was a long answer. We're definitely looking at potential joint ventures. One possibility is also that we talk to a off-taker. They'll be interested in supplying us with the capital to conduct this work that would eventually lead us into production in return for having a secure supply of graphite in the years to come. Whether that would then be with a little bit of a discount compared to market prices for graphite or something. There are even royalties. That's a possibility. Selling a smaller portion of the revenues from future production for capital being available now. That's certainly also an avenue that is actually quite attractive. Okay, I go on to the next here. Mark, are you seeing interest from potential end users to secure supply, and would they look to forward funds for the development of assets? Thanks. That's exactly what I was just talking about also. Yes, we are seeing some interest. And we've been talking to quite a few, I wouldn't say all, but some of the big car manufacturers, some of the bigger battery manufacturers. They do realize that graphite is probably going to become a problem, but presently it's like lithium is the only thing they can think about. So I'm sure it's going to be more evident for them and higher up on their agenda quite soon. But presently, none of them really have moved on to signing anything with us. But we are definitely talking to them and have signed, I don't know, at least 5 MOUs with such companies. So yes, they are interested. That's for sure. And of course, I'll be using all the mileage I can get out of the benchmark conference next 10 days from now in Budapest. Scott, when looking for outside funding, are you excluding Russian and Chinese groups due to their poor human rights and HSC ESG records? Yes, and that's part of the reason, but certainly also I think, as I just mentioned, we are completely missing the point if we join up with a Chinese manufacturer of anode material. I'm sure we could strike a deal with them quite quickly, but I think in the longer term it's not sustainable. And also they have not necessarily shown to be the best business partners. So we are presently looking at something that is more robust and also something that is more aligned with the current strategies from the EU Commission and the greater EU, of course, and also from the US, where a lot of subsidies are now being funneled into the energy transition. Yeah. Hi, Stefan. Andrew here asks, can you advise why the mine at Amitok previously ended operation 1924, and whilst it was in operation, was it profitable? I would think that it was profitable back then. In fact, when you walk around in the mine today, you see a lot of evidence that they were actually planning for increasing the production quite significantly. They put in a tram and an ore bin, and when you look inside the ore bin, you can see there's never seen ore. So there was a lot of construction going on, and they decided to pull out. I think from what I have read, although I haven't done really any research on this, but it's an interesting thing to look into. But what I have read is that the graphite prices on the world market plummeted after the closure of the First World War. So maybe the market just couldn't support the operation at Amitok. Later on, there was a rumor that was developing over the decades later that first of all that they ran out of ore, and also that the quality wasn't so good. I know that they have some issues with actually creating the concentrates that they wanted to, but certainly we can see here that they weren't running out of grades, weren't running out of ore, but of course they didn't have access to the kind of diamond drilling that we have today. So a lot of it would be exploration through drifting, which is a quite expensive way to explore for ore. Right. Okay, so here we have a question. It's a good question. Mark A asks, with the valuation differential showing the undervaluation, are these companies fully funded or at further development stage? None of them are in production. They are mostly at PFS. A few of them have a bit of funding, but I would say that it's always difficult to compare companies at the different stages, but I think that we are more or less at the same stage. Of course, like for instance, Talga in Sweden, they've been in business now for, I don't know, more than 10 years, and is a very well-known player now. So of course that means a lot. They've been listed now for many years. So of course investors know that company. We've only been on the market for 1.5 years. But my aim is that we get up there with the same so that the share price really reflects the true value of the company. So Paul asks here, what do you see as the biggest potential shareholder value adding events of the next 12 months? Right. Apart from the announcement of new results, we will have processing our 700 kilogram bulk sample. We will have processed some of it with this new machinery I was showing you to produce spherical graphite. We have electrochemical studies also providing evidence that this is a really good material for production of EV batteries. Several other things. Technically, it looks like it doesn't really matter too much what we are announcing. The share price doesn't really seem to move that much. What I think will change is when we get an agreement with a potential larger investment company, like for instance an off-taker or a substantial investment from a governmental body. I think that's something that really will drive us up in another category. And another thing, and this is something I'll be putting a lot of work into over the coming time, is just to make us more known to the players in the industry. That's a lot of work, but it's actually also fun. I think we have such a good project, and people just need to know more about us. Hi, Stefan. This is Mark T. Do you know how long it will take to build the hydroelectric plant? Will you need this before 27, or will the wind farm be enough power? Thank you. Okay. It's not a big hydropower plant. And actually, it is only marginally. I think it will provide most of the power, but maybe not all. But being a relatively small hydropower plant, it's potentially possible to put it up in a couple of years' time. And there's a lot of interest from the Greenland government side to support this. They have also plans of putting up a huge, big hydropower plant further to the north, which is a lot bigger. And they have some ambition also to supply mineral industry in general with green energy, because they also see that as a way to attract both investments and, of course, companies to work in Greenland. That's about 80 kilometers to the north, and that will take longer time. We can't wait for all of this, of course, and it's not like it's going to stop us from moving ahead. So instead, we have decided to, in the planning we're doing now, we are calculating with a diesel generator ship or barge that is moved into place so we can get started on the mining. And as we develop other CO2 neutral energy sources, we'll slowly replace that diesel generator plant with that. Why aren't the largest miners interested in graphite? Scott asks. Yes, so it's large mining companies, they just love big projects. And it's something about the economics. If you look at the investments they will have to make in terms of manpower and certainly also finances, it pays off better if they focus on the bigger deposits. So I remember back in my time, I worked on a JV with Anglo American, exploring for sedimentary copper deposits in northeastern Greenland, and one of their directors said to me when we were discussing drilling, but our minimum here would be 2 million tons of copper. So anything less than that, if there's no room, like if in where you're drilling, we're not going to drill. So okay, 2 million tons of ore is of contained copper. I think we could live with less than that, but that's kind of the philosophy that they have. Recently, Rio has entered the battery market. They are looking at some lithium mining. So I wouldn't, as the interest grows for graphite also, and as the industry start to realize how important graphite is and how undersupplied it will be in the future, maybe that will also change. And now we're approaching noon, so I think I will conclude here with this last question. I believe I don't see any other questions.
Stefan, yes, thank you very much. I think you actually managed to address all the questions from investors, and of course the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself, Stefan, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Yes. First of all, I would thank you all for attending today. I also thank you for your support on GreenRoc. I think we are on a really important mission here. I'm sure that the MTOC project is of a value that will make your investments turn out to be a good one. It will take some time. It is a journey we do together, I hope. But I can guarantee you that I'll do my best to make GreenRoc, and particularly our MTOC project, known to the big industrial players, to provide value for our shareholders. Thank you.
Stefan, thank you once again for updating investors today and being so generous with your time. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of GreenRoc Mining PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good afternoon to you all.